The acrid smoke of the battlefield stung Lieutenant Kalith Voss's eyes as she surveyed the carnage of Ash Valley. Caldera's crimson sky loomed overhead, a fitting backdrop to the bloodshed below. Her crystal sword glinted in the harsh light, its enchantments humming beneath her fingertips. The battle between the Windstorm Alliance and the Black Iron Empire had raged for days, turning the once verdant valley into a charred wasteland. "Lieutenant, eastern flank is breaking," shouted her second-in-command through the tactical comm embedded in her helmet. Kalith spun, spotting the weakness immediately. The Black Iron's mechanized infantry was making a push toward her vulnerable medic unit. Without hesitation, she sprinted across the battlefield, her enhanced armor propelling her forward with supernatural speed. She arrived just as an imposing Black Iron officer cut down one of her soldiers. His ornate battle armor marked him as high-ranking, probably a lord. He moved with precision that belied his bulk, each swing of his gravity blade leaving ripples in the air. "Get the wounded out," Kalith ordered the medics, as she positioned herself between them and the Black Iron officer. The man turned to her, his face partially obscured by his helmet, but his eyes, sharp and calculating, locked onto hers. "Another windstorm rat," he growled, his voice amplified by his suit's systems. "Lord Arco, I presume," Kalith replied, recognizing the insignia on his shoulder plate. Intelligence had identified him as a key strategist in the Black Iron hierarchy. "Your reputation precedes you." "As does yours, Lieutenant Voss." He shifted his stance blade, humming with dark energy. "The woman with the crystal sword. How fortunate to meet the famed witch knight on the battlefield." They circled each other, the chaos of war raging around them, but creating a strange bubble of focus. The first clash of their blades sent sparks of magical energy cascading across the scarred earth. Kalith felt the vibration through her arms, the power of his strike nearly buckling her knees. For several minutes they exchanged blows, testing defenses, searching for weaknesses. Lord Arco was formidable, his technique refined through decades of military service. But Kalith was quicker, her crystal sword responding to her thoughts almost before she formed them. The tide turned when Arco glanced over her shoulder, distracted momentarily by movement in his peripheral vision. Kalith seized the opening, lunging forward with supernatural speed. Her blade sliced across his face, cutting through his helmet's faceplate and into the flesh beneath. Blood, bright red, and startlingly human, sprayed outward. A single drop landed on the edge of her crystal sword, and immediately the weapon began to pulse with an internal light. Kalith felt the ancient magic activate a binding ritual, as old as warfare itself. Horror dawned as she realized what had happened. The Blood Oath Law had been invoked. Lord Arco staggered backward, one hand clutching his wounded face, blood seeping between his fingers. His eyes widened in recognition as he too witnessed the sword's reaction. "The Blood Oath," he whispered, his voice suddenly stripped of its menace. "Your blade has tasted my blood." "Impossible," Kalith breathed, though she knew it was true. The ancient law, embedded in the very crystal of her sword, mandated that the wielder must protect the one whose blood touched the blade, even an enemy, until the debt was repaid. Around them, the battle continued to rage, but both warriors stood frozen by the implications of what had just occurred. Kalith was now magically bound to protect the very man she had been trying to kill moments before. A shell exploded nearby, breaking their trance. Making a split-second decision that would forever alter her fate, Kalith grabbed Lord Arco's arm. "Come with me if you want to live," she said, hating the words even as they left her mouth. "The Blood Oath demands it." Confusion, pain, and a hint of something unreadable flashed across what was visible of Arco's face. Then, understanding the gravity of their situation, he nodded once and allowed her to lead him away from the front lines. The ancient magic had bound their fates together, enemy to enemy, in the middle of a war that showed no signs of ending. Neither could have known that this moment would not only change their lives, but the future of Caldera itself. The acid smoke of Ash Valley swallowed them as they disappeared into the chaos, the crystal sword still pulsing with the crimson oath that now governed their shared destiny. Sneaking a high-ranking enemy officer into a Windstorm Alliance medical tent required all of Calith's cunning and the considerable respect her fellow soldiers held for her. She claimed Lord Arco was a valuable prisoner, one who needed to be kept alive for intelligence purposes. The medics, overwhelmed with casualties, merely nodded and directed her to a quiet corner. Calith applied magical bandages to Arco's face wound, obscuring his features and making him unrecognizable to casual observers. The enchanted gauze would accelerate healing while preventing infection from Caldera's toxic atmosphere. "You realize this is treason," Arco murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I'm aware," Calith replied tersely, checking that the bandages were secure. "But the blood oath leaves me no choice. My sword tasted your blood, and now I'm bound to protect you until the debt is repaid." "An ancient superstition," he scoffed, though his eyes betrayed uncertainty. "I didn't think any Windstorm soldiers still adhered to the old codes." "My family has carried this blade for 7 generations," she said, her hand instinctively moving to the crystal sword strapped to her back. "The magic is real, Lord Arco. As real as the war outside." He studied her face, searching for deception. "And what happens now, Lieutenant Will? You parade me before your commanders as a trophy?" "If I did that, they'd execute you immediately." She checked over her shoulder, ensuring they weren't being observed too closely. "And then the oath would demand my life as forfeit for failing to protect you." For the first time, genuine concern crossed Arco's partially visible features. "You'd die." "Horribly," Calith confirmed without emotion. "The crystal would shatter and drive shards through my heart. It's happened before to ancestors who failed the oath." A tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sounds of battle and the groans of the wounded around them. "There's something you should know," Arco finally said, his voice different, now urgent, conspiratorial. "Something worth more than my life or yours." Calith narrowed her eyes. "If this is some ploy—" "There's a coup brewing within the Black Iron Empire," he interrupted. "A faction that wants to prolong this war indefinitely. They call themselves the Ash Pact." Despite herself, Calith leaned closer. "Go on." "General Valruk, my former mentor, leads them. They've been sabotaging peace negotiations for years." Arco's eyes darkened with genuine anger. "This war serves them. It's profitable. Weapons contracts, mineral rights to contested territories, political power." "Why tell me this?" Calith asked, suspicion evident in her tone. "Because your blood oath may be the only thing keeping me alive long enough to expose them." He reached out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. "Neither the Alliance nor the Empire wants this endless war, Lieutenant. Only the profiteers do." Before Calith could respond, the tent flap opened and Commander Haldrick Fenn entered, his sharp eyes immediately finding hers. "Lieutenant Voss," he said, his tone clipped. "A word." Calith stood, positioning herself subtly between Arco and her superior. "Sir." They stepped outside the crimson sky, now darkening as Caldera's quick night approached. "That's not just any prisoner, is it?" Fenn asked without preamble. "My intel officers tell me Lord Thane Arco was seen engaged in combat with you, before mysteriously disappearing from the battlefield." Calith maintained her composure. "He's a high-value intelligence asset, sir." "Is that why you've bandaged his face beyond recognition and haven't reported his capture through proper channels?" Fenn's voice was dangerously soft. "Don't insult my intelligence, Voss. The crystal sword on your back is glowing with the ancient binding. You've invoked the blood oath." Cold fear slid down Calith's spine. Commander Fenn was one of the few who would recognize the signs. "The oath is legally binding under the old codes," she said carefully. "Codes the Alliance still officially honors. Codes that have no place in modern warfare." Fenn's jaw tightened. "You have 2 choices, Lieutenant. Turn Lord Arco over to military intelligence for immediate interrogation and execution, or find a way to nullify the blood oath." "And if I refuse both options, sir?" Fenn's eyes hardened. "Then, you'll be charged with treason, and we'll take him anyway. The crystal will kill you, but that will be your choice." He checked his tactical display. You have until dawn to decide. That's more generous than regulations require. He walked away, leaving Calith standing alone under the alien sky, the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her shoulders. When she returned to Arco, she found him sitting upright, alert despite his injuries. Your commander isn't pleased, he observed. We're leaving, Calith said, already gathering essential supplies. Now, where could we possibly go? Arco asked, though he was already rising to his feet. The entire planet is a war zone. Calith secured her crystal sword and handed Arco a standard-issue pulse pistol. The ash wasteland, beyond the battle lines. That's suicide, he protested. The acid storms alone. We'll be less certain death than staying here, she finished for him. Besides, I believe you about the Ash Pact. If there's even a chance to end this war. Understanding dawned on Arco's face. The nomadic cloud cannon tribes control the wastes. If we could reach them, they're neutral in this conflict, Calith nodded. And they have communication networks that reach both capitals. They might help us expose the conspiracy. Arco concluded, newfound respect in his voice. Calith checked her tactical display one last time. We have 4 hours until the night patrol changes. We'll slip out during the shift transition. She fixed him with a hard stare. I'm bound to protect you, Lord Arco, but if you try to escape or betray me, I won't, he said simply. My life is in your hands, Lieutenant Voss, and perhaps the future of Caldera is in both of ours. As the acid night of Caldera descended fully, they prepared for a journey into one of the most inhospitable regions of the planet, pursued by both sides of a war that neither fully understood until now. The ash wasteland stretched before them, a vast expanse of gray desolation, punctuated by jagged rock formations and skeletal remains of ancient technology. Caustic dust swirled in the hot wind, forcing Calith and Arco to wear filtration masks scavenged from the medical tent. 3 days had passed since their escape from the windstorm camp, and already they'd had several close calls with patrol units from both factions. We'll need to reach the Obsidian Ridge by nightfall, Calith said, consulting her outdated map. The acid rain will start soon, and there's no shelter in the open flats. Arco, his face still partially bandaged, though beginning to heal, studied the horizon. The ridge is farther than it appears. The wasteland plays tricks with perspective. You've been here before, Calith asked, surprised. Special operations early in the war. He didn't elaborate further, but his grim expression spoke volumes. They trudged onward, the heat slowly sapping their strength, despite the protective suits they wore. Calith kept her crystal sword accessible, its faint glow, a reminder of the oath that bound them together. Twice they had to hide from aerial patrols, pressing themselves into shallow depressions in the ashen ground while craft thundered overhead. By mid-afternoon, Calith noticed Arco was struggling. His breathing labored, his pace slowing. We need to rest, she insisted, guiding him toward a small outcropping that offered minimal shade. The ridge, he began to protest. Will do us no good if you collapse before we reach it. She handed him their water ration. Drink. Your wound is draining your strength. Reluctantly, he accepted the water. As he drank, Calith scanned their surroundings, the military instincts honed by years of combat, never fully at rest. Why did you join the Black Iron Forces? She asked, suddenly, the question that had been nagging at her since they fled. Arco lowered the water container, considering his answer. Family tradition initially. The Arcos have served the Empire for generations. He paused, his gaze distant. I believed in the cause once. The Empire brought order, stability, technological advancement. At the cost of freedom, Calith pointed out. Is your alliance truly free, Lieutenant? He countered. Or merely governed by different masters with prettier words? Before she could respond, her enhanced hearing picked up a faint sound, the distinctive whine of hover engines, still distant but approaching. Company, she warned, retrieving the water and packing it away. Sounds like windstorm scout bikes. They abandoned their rest spot, moving quickly toward a nearby ravine that might offer concealment. The ravine deepened as they followed it, the walls rising around them until they were shielded from view. "This is a mistake," Arco whispered urgently. "Ravines like this are death traps during acid storms." "We don't have a choice," Calith replied, leading him deeper. "The scout unit will have thermal sensors. Our only advantage is breaking their line of sight." They pressed on the sound of the hoverbikes growing louder. The ravine curved sharply, revealing a narrow passage barely wide enough for them to squeeze through single file. Calith went first, her slender frame slipping through the gap with relative ease. Arco, broader in the shoulders despite his injury. Induced weakness struggled behind her. "I'm stuck," he hissed, panic edging into his voice. Calith turned back, seeing him wedged between the stone walls, his protective suit catching on sharp protrusions. Without hesitation, she reached back, gripping his outstretched hand. "Push with your legs while I pull." Their combined effort freed him with a sudden lurch, sending them both tumbling to the ground on the other side of the narrow passage. They found themselves in a small cavity within the ravine, a natural chamber hidden from the outside world. And they weren't alone. 3 figures materialized from the shadows, weapons trained on them. Their attire, patchwork armor, made from salvaged technology and indigenous materials, marked them as cloud cannon nomads. "Trespassers," said the foremost figure, a woman with intricate facial tattoos and a modified pulse rifle. "Soldiers from the warring tribes." Calith slowly raised her hands, indicating Arco should do the same. "We seek passage through the wasteland. Nothing more." The woman's eyes narrowed, taking in their appearances, particularly Calith's crystal sword and Arco's bandaged face. A witch knight and her prisoner, or perhaps her patient? "Neither," Calith answered truthfully. "We bear information vital to both the Alliance and the Empire. Information that could end the war." A derisive laugh escaped the nomad leader. "The war ends only when the last soldier falls. So our ancestors witnessed, so we believe." "Please," Arco spoke up, his voice carrying unexpected authority despite their precarious position. "I am Lord Thane Arco of the Black Iron Empire. This is Lieutenant Calith Voss of the Windstorm Alliance. We've discovered a conspiracy that prolongs the conflict for profit." The nomads exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "I am Maya Thorne," the woman finally said. "Chief Scout of the Cloud Cannon clan." She lowered her weapon slightly. What conspiracy could possibly unite sworn enemies? Before either could answer, the distant whine of hoverbikes grew dramatically louder, echoing through the ravine. Maya made a quick gesture, and one of her companions slipped away to investigate. "They're coming down the ravine," she informed them tensely. "Your pursuit—" Calith nodded. "Alliance scout unit. They'll have orders to capture or kill us both." Maya seemed to make a decision. "Follow, quickly and silently." She led them deeper into the network of chambers, through passages so narrow and winding that Calith quickly lost all sense of direction. After what seemed like hours, but was likely only minutes, they emerged into a larger cavern where a small settlement had been established. Primitive technology, mixed with salvaged military equipment, created an incongruous but functional living space. "You will remain here until the storm passes," Maya instructed. "Then we will discuss your conspiracy and decide your fate." As if on cue, a low rumble of thunder sounded from outside, the first indication of the approaching acid storm. "Thank you," Calith said sincerely. Maya's expression remained impassive. "Don't thank me yet, Witch Knight. I've saved you from your pursuers, but your true trial lies ahead." She nodded towards several elders, gathered around a central fire pit. "The Council of Echoes will hear your story. If they find falsehood in your words—" She drew a finger across her throat in universal understanding. Left alone in a small side chamber, equipped with basic sleeping pallets, Calith and Arco finally had a moment to breathe. "The nomads are our best chance," Arco said quietly. Their communication network could spread word of the Ash Pact to both capitals simultaneously. "If they believe us," Calith reminded him, "they'll believe the evidence." He reached into a hidden compartment, in his partially removed armor, extracting a small data crystal. Everything I've gathered over the past year. Financial records, intercepted communications, the identities of conspirators on both sides. Calith stared at the crystal in shock. "You've had that all along. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because until the blood oath, I had no reason to trust you," he admitted. "And after it, I needed to be certain your protection wasn't merely magical compulsion." She wanted to be angry, but his logic was sound. "And now I believe you want to end this war as much as I do." He held the crystal out to her. "The Ash Pact has agents in the Alliance too, Lieutenant. High-ranking officers, politicians, weapons manufacturers. They orchestrate battles like the one at Ash Valley, ensuring maximum casualties and minimal strategic gains." As Calith took the crystal, the implications dawned on her fully. The failed peace talks, the sabotage ceasefires, the raids that always seem to reignite hostilities, just as tensions cool. All orchestrated, Arco confirmed grimly. Two governments manipulated into endless conflict by those who profit from death. The acid rain began to fall outside, hissing as it contacted the stone, filling the air with toxic fumes that even the cavern's ventilation systems couldn't fully filter out. But inside, a different kind of poison was being neutralized, the poisonous lies that had kept two nations at war. Calith studied the crystal in her palm, then looked at Arco's bandaged face. "When the storm passes, we present this to the Council of Echoes. And if they believe us, we make for the Cloud Palace," Arco finished. "The ancient neutral ground where both governments maintain diplomatic outposts." "It's heavily guarded," Calith warned. A grim smile appeared on the visible portion of Arco's face. "That's why I'll need more than just your sword to protect me, Lieutenant. I'll need your warrior's heart as well." Outside, the storm raged, acids eating away at stone and metal alike. Inside, an unlikely alliance was being forged, one that would either save their world or condemn them both to death as traitors. The Council of Echoes. 5 tribal elders, seated in a semicircle around the central fire pit, listened in silence as Calith and Arco presented their evidence. The data crystal projected its contents above the fire, casting eerie light across the gathered faces of the Cloud Cannon clan. Financial transactions, military orders, intercepted communications, all pointing to a conspiracy that spanned both warring factions. When they finished, the eldest council member, a woman with milky blind eyes and skin like weathered leather, spoke first. "For generations we have watched your peoples destroy each other and our world," she said, her voice cracking with age. "We believed it was the nature of outsiders to wage war. Now you tell us it is the greed of the few that dooms the many." "That is the truth of it," Arco confirmed. The blind elder turned her face toward him, seeming to see despite her sightless eyes. "And you, Lord of Iron, why do you betray your own? Even with the Witch Knight's blood oath, what drives you to such treachery against your masters?" Arco straightened his bearing suddenly, every inch the nobleman, despite his bedraggled appearance. "I swore an oath to protect the Empire and its people. The Ash Pact betrays that oath every day this war continues." Another elder, a man with augmented mechanical limbs, leaned forward. "And you, Windstorm Warrior, what guarantees your loyalty to this cause rather than to your commanders?" Calith's hand rested instinctively on her crystal sword. "The blood oath binds me to protect Lord Arco, but it is my own conscience that binds me to protect Caldera. I've lost too many friends to a war that serves only the powerful." Maya Thorne, standing at the edge of the council circle, spoke up. "The evidence is compelling, but what would you have us do? We are neutral. Our survival depends on remaining so." "We need transport to the Cloud Palace," Calith explained, "and a secure communication channel to deliver this evidence to trustworthy members of both governments simultaneously." The council members exchanged glances, an unspoken conversation passing between them. Finally, the blind elder raised a gnarled hand. "The winds speak truth in your voices," she pronounced. "The Cloud Cannon will provide escort to the border of our territory. Beyond that, your fate is your own." She pointed a crooked finger at the data crystal. We will also broadcast this evidence through our networks when you reach the Cloud Palace. If you succeed, all will know the truth. If you fail... If we fail, send it anyway, Arco said firmly. Better to die knowing the truth will emerge than live in a lie. The council session concluded, and preparations began immediately. Calith and Arco were provided with specialized protective gear designed for the wasteland's harsh conditions. Maya Thorne herself would lead the escort team. As they prepared to depart, Arco approached Calith, his face now healing enough that the bandages had been reduced, revealing the long gash that would certainly leave a dramatic scar. "You've upheld your end of the blood oath admirably, Lieutenant," he said quietly. "When this is over, the debt will be considered paid." Calith felt an unexpected pang at his words. "Is that what you want?" "What I want ceased to matter the moment we discovered the Ash Pact's existence," he replied. "But I find myself grateful for your protection beyond what magic might compel." Before Calith could respond, Maya interrupted them. "We move now. The aftermath of the acid storm provides cover from aerial surveillance." The journey to the edge of the Cloud Cannon territory took 2 days of careful navigation through the wasteland. Twice, they encountered automated defense drones, likely deployed by the Ash Pact to monitor remote regions. Maya's team disabled them with practiced efficiency, ensuring no transmission escaped to alert their enemies. At the border, marked by a towering obsidian monolith, carved with ancient tribal symbols, Maya stopped. "This is as far as we go," she announced. "The Cloud Palace lies 3 days' journey in that direction." She pointed toward a distant mountain range barely visible through the hazy atmosphere. "Our scouts report increased military activity in the region. Your presence has been noted by both sides." "Thank you for your help," Calith said sincerely. Maya's expression softened slightly. "My people have lived in the ashes of your wars for generations. Perhaps it is time for new growth." She handed Calith a small device. "This will alert us when you reach the palace. Our communication network stands ready." With a final exchange of solemn nods, the nomads melted back into the wasteland, leaving Calith and Arco to face the most dangerous leg of their journey alone. They traveled mostly at night when the heat was less intense, and visibility for potential pursuers was reduced. During the day, they sought shelter in rock formations or the ruins of pre-war structures that dotted the landscape. Their conversation, initially sparse and tactical, gradually evolved into something more personal, as the shared danger fostered an unexpected bond. "Tell me about your family," Arco asked during one rest period as they huddled in the shadow of a fallen transport ship, half buried in ash. Calith, cleaning her crystal sword with practiced movements, looked up in surprise. "Why?" "Because if we die tomorrow, I'd like to know who I dragged to their death besides a nameless windstorm lieutenant." Despite herself, she smiled faintly. "Not exactly comforting." "Comfort is in short supply these days." She returned to her sword maintenance, but after a moment began to speak. "My parents were both Alliance officers. They died in the Battle of Shard Reach when I was 14. My grandmother raised me after that. She was the one who passed down the crystal sword of family heirloom. And with it the old codes," Arco observed. Calith nodded. "The Blood Oath is the most serious of them, but there are others. Rules for honorable combat protection of civilians, mercy for the defeated." Her expression hardened. "Rules that this war has eroded with each passing year." "Your grandmother sounds like a formidable woman." "She was. She taught me that a warrior's greatest strength isn't their weapon or armor, but their principles." Calith sheathed her sword, the conversation making her unexpectedly emotional. "What about you? Is being a lord in the Empire as grand as it sounds?" Arco let out a short, humorless laugh. "Hardly. It's primarily a military title earned through service rather than birthright. My family were scholars before the war specialists in ancient technology. The Empire recruited us to develop weapons." His voice grew distant. "My research helped create the gravity blades that have killed thousands of Alliance soldiers." "Why tell me that?" Calith asked. "Because guilt is a powerful motivator, Lieutenant." He met her gaze directly. I've paid for my comfortable lord's quarters with the blood of your comrades. Exposing the Ash Pact is the only atonement I can offer." The honesty in his voice struck Calith deeply. She'd expected to find him calculating, perhaps manipulative, using the blood oath for his own protection, while advancing some hidden agenda. Instead, she discovered a man as haunted by the war as she was seeking redemption in his own way. On the third day, they reached the foothills of the mountain range, where the Cloud Palace perched, a massive structure of ancient design, predating even the earliest settlements on Caldera. Its white stone walls gleamed against the dark mountains, visible for miles across the wasteland. "The diplomatic approach will be heavily guarded," Arco observed as they surveyed the palace from a concealed position. "And we can assume both Alliance and Empire forces have been alerted to watch for us." Calith studied the structure through enhanced optics. "There's a maintenance entrance on the western face, used by the native staff who keep the palace functioning. Less security, but a more difficult climb." "Then, that's our route," Arco decided. "Once inside, we need to reach the Great Forum. It's the one place where representatives from both governments are guaranteed to be present, along with neutral witnesses. And if the Ash Pact has agents inside, they almost certainly do." Arco's expression was grim. "Which is why we'll need to move quickly once we're discovered. The evidence must be presented before they can stop us." They began their approach as dusk fell, using the lengthening shadows to cover their movement. The maintenance entrance required scaling a near-vertical rock face, made more treacherous by the smooth alien material of the palace walls. Halfway up, disaster struck. A loose stone gave way beneath Arco's foot, sending him swinging precariously from one handhold. The noise attracted attention from a guard post above. "Intruders on the western face," came a shout, followed by the whine of charging weapons. Calith, several meters above Arco, made a split-second decision. She secured her position with one hand and reached down with the other. "Take my hand." "You can't pull us both up," he shouted back. "The blood oath demands I try." Even as she said it, Calith knew this was more than magical compulsion driving her. Something had changed between them in the wasteland. Arco grasped her outstretched hand, just as energy bolts began to impact around them, shattering the ancient stone and sending deadly fragments flying. With strength born of desperation, Calith pulled him up to her level, and together they scrambled for the maintenance entrance just meters away. They tumbled through the small doorway, seconds before a barrage of fire would have cut them down. Inside, emergency alarms were already blaring, the sound echoing through the cavernous interior of the palace. "They'll lock down the forum," Arco warned, already moving, despite his obvious exhaustion. "We have minutes at most." They raced through maintenance corridors, Calith leading the way, based on half-remembered schematics from Alliance intelligence briefings. Twice, they encountered palace security, and twice Calith's crystal sword made short work of their weapons, disabling rather than killing when possible. Finally, they reached a service entrance to the Great Forum, finding it already secured with an emergency force field. "Can we break through?" Arco asked, eyeing the shimmering barrier. Calith unsheathed her crystal sword. "Stand back." She channeled her energy into the blade, causing it to glow with intensifying light. With a precisely calculated strike, she plunged it into the field generator. The barrier flickered and died, leaving the entrance open. But the effort had cost her. The crystal sword's light dimmed noticeably, and Calith, staggered, suddenly weakened. "The sword," Arco noticed with alarm. "Using it against technology drains its power." "And yours?" she admitted, steadying herself. "But we're through. Let's finish this." They burst into the Great Forum, a massive circular chamber, with a central speaking platform surrounded by tiered seating, where diplomats from both factions were already rising in alarm at their entrance. Security personnel moved to intercept them, weapons drawn. "Stop!" Arco's voice boomed, with commanding authority, momentarily freezing everyone in place. "I am Lord Thane Arco of the Black Iron Empire, and I bring evidence of treason against both our nations." In the momentary confusion, Calith spotted a familiar face among the Alliance delegation, Commander Haldrick Fenn, the very man who had threatened her back in the medical tent. And beside him, wearing the elaborate armor of a black iron general, was an older man whose bearing marked him immediately as Arko's former mentor, General Valruk. "Traitors!" Valruk bellowed, rising from his seat. "Guards, kill them both." Calith stepped forward, crystal sword raised despite its weakened state. "The evidence will be broadcast regardless of our fate. The Cloud Cannon Network stands ready." This announcement caused fresh murmurs of concern throughout the chamber. Unauthorized broadcasts from the nomadic tribes were rare, but had historically proven impossible to suppress once initiated. Commander Fenn, perhaps realizing the futility of silencing them, now raised a hand to stay the guards. "Let them speak. Let us hear this supposed evidence." It was a calculated move, an attempt to control the narrative, but it gave Calith and Arko the opening they needed. They approached the central platform, and Arko inserted the data crystal into the ancient interface. The chamber darkened, and holographic projections sprang to life around the entire forum. Financial records, tactical orders, private communications, all pointing to the existence of the Ash Pact and its manipulation of the conflict. For 7 years, Arko addressed the stunned assembly. Elements within both our governments have deliberately prolonged this war. They have sabotaged peace talks, orchestrated attacks to reignite hostilities, and profited from the bloodshed of our peoples. Calith stepped forward. The Battle of Ash Valley was designed to fail. Both sides were manipulated into a conflict that would maximize casualties while achieving no strategic objective. The evidence continued to unspool around them, irrefutable damning. Among the diplomatic corps, expressions of shock and horror predominated. But among certain military officers and civilian attachés, Calith observed something else: calculation, fear, rage. General Valruk was the first to make his move. With surprising speed for a man his age, he vaulted over the diplomatic railing and charged toward the central platform gravity blade, humming to life in his hand. "You dishonor your oath to the Empire, Arko," he roared. "For this alliance which—" Calith intercepted him, her crystal sword meeting his gravity blade in a spectacular clash of energies that sent shockwaves through the chamber. But her weakened state and the sword's diminished power put her at a severe disadvantage against the general's raw strength and decades of experience. She found herself driven back, barely parrying his vicious strikes. Around them, chaos erupted as security forces from both factions clashed, some moving to support Valruk, others, perhaps those not implicated in the conspiracy, working to secure the exits and protect the diplomatic corps. "Your crystal weapon fails you, Witch Knight," Valruk sneered as he pressed his advantage. "As your misplaced loyalty fails your alliance." A particularly powerful blow knocked Calith to her knees, her sword arm trembling with the effort of keeping his blade at bay. The crystal sword's light flickered alarmingly, its ancient magic strained to breaking point. In that moment, Calith faced the ultimate test of the Blood Oath. She could release the sword, save herself, and let Arko face Valruk alone, almost certainly resulting in his death. The oath would be broken, but she might survive. Instead, she poured her remaining strength into the crystal, causing it to flare with renewed brilliance. "My loyalty is to justice," she gritted out, slowly rising back to her feet. "Not to men who profit from suffering." With a surge of energy born from conviction, rather than magic, she drove Valruk back several steps. But the effort cost her dearly, and she knew she couldn't maintain it for long. Just as Valruk prepared for what would surely be a killing stroke, a new combatant entered the fray. Arko, having secured the data broadcast, leapt between them, parrying Valruk's blow with a ceremonial blade he'd seized from a nearby display. "Your fight is with me, General," he declared, positioning himself protectively in front of the exhausted Calith. "It always has been." Valruk's face contorted with rage. "You would die for this alliance, dog, for abstract principles. Where is your loyalty to the Empire that made you—" "My loyalty is to the people of the Empire," Arko replied steadily, "not to the warmongers who sacrifice them for profit." Their blades met in a deadly dance, former mentor against protege. Though Arco was still recovering from his injuries, his technique was flawless, the product of years of training under the very man he now fought. Kalith struggled to her feet, unwilling to leave Arco to face Valrook alone. The blood oath compelled her to protect him, but something beyond ancient magic drove her now, something she hadn't expected to find in the midst of war. Around them, the tide of the battle had turned. The evidence broadcast had done its work, and many of the security forces were now moving to apprehend identified members of the Ash Pact, rather than attack the messengers. Commander Fen, seeing his allies falling one by one, made a desperate move. He produced a compact energy weapon and took aim not at Kalith or Arco, but at the ancient control systems of the Cloud Palace itself. "If I can't win this war," he snarled, "no one gets to declare peace." Kalith saw his intention too late to prevent him from firing. The blast struck the central controls, and immediately warning sirens began to blare throughout the structure. The palace's defenses, designed millennia ago to prevent warfare within its walls, began to activate with potentially catastrophic results for everyone inside. "He's initiated the purge protocol," shouted a local technician, panic evident in his voice. "The palace will cleanse itself of all combatants." Ancient defense systems emerged from hidden compartments in the walls and sealing their weapons, charging with ominous hums. These systems wouldn't distinguish between factions, they would eliminate any detected aggression. In the momentary distraction, Valrook saw his opportunity. He knocked Arco's blade aside and thrust forward, aiming for a killing blow. Kalith, operating on instinct and the compulsion of the blood oath, threw herself forward. Her weakened crystal sword intercepted Valrook's gravity blade, mere inches from Arco's heart. The clash of technologies produced a catastrophic reaction. The crystal sword shattered its fragments, exploding outward in a burst of brilliant light. Valrook was thrown backward by the blast, while Kalith collapsed to the ground, the broken hilt of her ancestral weapon still clutched in her hand. According to the ancient laws, the breaking of the sword in defense of the blood-marked one fulfilled the oath, but at terrible cost to the wielder. Pain unlike anything she'd ever experienced coursed through Kalith's body, as crystal shards embedded themselves in her flesh. Her vision blurred, the world reduced to vague shapes in blazing agony. Through the haze, she saw Arco kneeling beside her, his face a mask of concern, and something deeper. "Kalith, stay with me." Around them, the ancient defense systems continued to activate, but something unexpected was happening. The crystal fragments embedded in Kalith's body were resonating with the palace's technology, creating an interface that hadn't existed for millennia. "The blood oath," she managed to whisper through the pain. "It's complete, you're free." "No," Arco said firmly, taking her hand. "This isn't how our story ends." With a sudden inspiration, he picked up the largest fragment of the crystal sword and pressed it to his own wound, the facial injury that had started everything. His blood coated the crystal again, but this time deliberately. "I invoke the reciprocal oath." He declared, his voice carrying a formal weight that seemed to resonate with the very walls around them. "By my blood freely given, I bind myself to protect Kalith Voss until her debt of pain is repaid." The crystal fragment glowed with renewed light, and miraculously, the shards embedded in Kalith's body responded in kind. Instead of driving deeper, as the ancient curse demanded, they began to stabilize the pain, receding to a manageable level. The palace's defense systems, detecting the activation of an ancient protocol, even older than their programming, hesitated in their attack sequence. A holographic interface materialized before Arco, displaying symbols in a language long forgotten by modern inhabitants of Caldera. Acting on instinct, Arco placed the blood-coated crystal fragment against the interface. The entire chamber shuddered, and then the defense weapons retracted, the alarms silenced. A new hologram appeared, a recording from the original builders of the Cloud Palace, activated by the recognition of the blood oath ritual. The message, automatically translated into modern language, echoed throughout the now silent forum. "The blood oath is honored. Peace shall prevail in these halls. Let those bound by blood lead the way to reconciliation." When the message faded, the chaotic scene had transformed. The surviving diplomats from both factions, having witnessed both the evidence of conspiracy and the activation of the ancient peace protocol, stood in stunned silence. An elderly Alliance diplomat was the first to step forward. "The evidence is irrefutable. The Ash Pact has betrayed us all." She looked toward her Empire counterpart. "Perhaps it is time to truly talk of peace." The Empire diplomat, equally shaken by the revelations, nodded slowly. "Too much blood has been shed for profit. It ends today." As impromptu peace discussions began around them, Arco helped Calith to a seated position supporting her weakened body. "Why?" she asked, still struggling to comprehend his invocation of the reciprocal oath, a binding even more serious than the original blood oath, and one entered voluntarily. "Because some bonds go beyond ancient magic," he replied simply. "What began as compulsion has become choice." Calith looked down at the crystal fragment still embedded in her skin, now glowing with a steady, painless light. "The sword is broken, but its power remains. Differently now, perhaps." He touched his scarred face. "As we remain differently than before." Around them, members of both factions were already beginning the complex process of identifying and apprehending Ash Pact collaborators. The long task of building peace from the ashes of manufactured war was just beginning. It would not be easy, but for the first time in a generation it seemed possible. "What happens now?" Calith asked, her voice stronger, as the crystal fragments continued their healing work. Arco looked around at the historic scene unfolding in the Great Forum, then back to her. "Now we rebuild, both our world and ourselves." He hesitated, then added, "If you'll stand with me." Calith felt the weight of the broken sword in her hand, the echo of generations of ancestors who had upheld the blood oath. But she also felt something new, a bond formed not through ancient magic, but through shared purpose and growing trust. "I will," she said, her decision made. Not because of any oath, but because it's right. As medical teams finally reached them, Calith and Arco exchanged a look of perfect understanding. The blood oath had brought them together as enemies. The reciprocal oath would bind them as allies, and whatever grew between them beyond those ancient bonds would be entirely their own choice, forged in the fires of war, but flourishing, they hoped, in the dawn of peace. 1 year later, the Cloud Palace once again hosted representatives from the Windstorm Alliance and the Black Iron Empire. But unlike the tense diplomatic standoffs of the past, this gathering celebrated the formal ratification of the Blood Oath Treaty, officially ending the war, and establishing frameworks for cooperation between the formerly hostile nations. The Great Forum, restored after the damage from the confrontation a year earlier, was filled with diplomats, military officers, and even representatives from the Cloud Cannon tribes, whose vital role in exposing the Ash Pact had earned them new respect from both major powers. At the center of the proceedings stood Calith Voss and Thane Arco. She wore a formal Alliance uniform modified to accommodate the crystal fragments that remained permanently embedded in her skin, now arranged in an intricate pattern that glowed with subtle energy. He bore his facial scar proudly, the mark that had set their journey in motion. Together, they presented the finalized treaty to the assembled dignitaries. The document incorporated both modern diplomatic language and passages from the ancient codes that had governed the Blood Oath, creating a unique hybrid of old wisdom and new pragmatism. "For too long, we allowed ourselves to be manipulated into conflict," Arco addressed the assembly. "The Ash Pact exploited our differences and historic grievances, turning them into justifications for endless war. Today, we honor a different tradition," Calith continued. "The tradition of the Blood Oath, not as a curse or magical compulsion, but as a sacred responsibility to protect even those we once considered enemies." The treaty was signed with appropriate ceremony by the new leaders of both factions, those who had risen to power after the Ash Pact conspirators were removed from their positions. As the formal proceedings concluded, Calith and Arco found themselves approached by Maya Thorne, now serving as the official representative of the Cloud Cannon tribes. "The wasteland blooms," she said by way of greeting, referencing the remarkable ecological recovery that had begun in the absence of constant warfare. The toxic byproducts of weapons technology had ceased polluting Caldera's atmosphere, allowing natural regeneration processes to take hold. Thanks in no small part to your people's knowledge, Arco acknowledged. The Cloud Cannon's centuries of adaptation to the harsh environment had proven invaluable in remediation efforts. "And what of you two?" Maya asked with knowing eyes. "The Blood Oath Guardians, as the people call you now." Calith and Arco exchanged a glance. Their new roles officially serving as joint ambassadors between the factions, unofficially, as the living embodiments of the peace accord, kept them constantly busy traveling between territories and mediating disputes. "We continue our work," Calith answered simply. Maya's tattooed face creased in a knowing smile. "And the reciprocal oath, does it still bind you now that your wounds have healed?" The question touched on something deeply personal. The magical compulsion of both oaths had indeed faded, as Calith's injuries healed and the shards integrated fully with her body. What remained was something neither of them spoke of publicly, a connection forged through shared hardship and mutual respect that had evolved into something neither had expected to find in the midst of war. "Some bonds transcend ancient magic," Arco said unconsciously, echoing his words from a year earlier. His hand found Calith's, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that required no explanation. Maya nodded satisfied. "Then the oldest prophecy of my people is fulfilled. When blood enemies become bloodbound, Caldera will heal its ancient wounds." As Maya departed to join her delegation, Calith and Arco stepped onto a balcony overlooking the transformed landscape. The wasteland was indeed beginning to bloom patches of native vegetation, reclaiming territory long scorched by warfare. In the distance, joint research facilities studied the planet's recovery, while mixed teams of former soldiers worked to clear dangerous remnants of battle. "Did you ever imagine this?" Calith asked, gazing at the world they had helped create. "When my blade cut your face that day in Ash Valley?" Arco touched his scar reflectively. "I imagined many ends for us, Lieutenant, most involving one of us killing the other." His expression softened as he looked at her. This outcome was unexpected. The crystal fragments in Calith's skin pulsed gently with her heartbeat, a permanent reminder of the price paid for peace. "No regrets about invoking the reciprocal oath?" "None." His answer came without hesitation. "Though the magic may have faded, I find I'm still quite determined to protect you." Calith smiled, a rare expression that transformed her battle-hardened features. "Likewise, Lord Arco." Beyond them, Caldera continued its slow healing. The war had left scars that would never fully vanish, just as the crystal shards would always mark Calith's body, just as the blade wound would forever mark Arco's face. But from those scars, something new and unexpected had grown. What began with a slash of a blade and a drop of blood had transformed into a bond stronger than ancient magic, more enduring than hatred, more powerful than war. It was a bond of choice, renewed each day, not because of a mystical oath, but because two former enemies had found in each other something worth protecting, a future neither could have imagined, but both now fought to preserve. As the sun set over the recovering world, casting the cloud palace in golden light, Calith and Arco stood together at the threshold of that future, blood enemies turned blood-bound guardians of a peace as unexpected as it was precious.